Already on the call, but no. Okay, we're connected to audio. At this point, they should be able to see the screen, hear the audio, but not give us any feedback. So if they want to talk, they need to raise their hand.
Or they can go ahead and enter something into the chat.
Right, for chat. Okay, so hopefully they heard that, or you guys can confirm that to them. And there's your flashy ESP.
You don't need that.
You don't? You want me to just go back to the...
You go ahead and start if you don't mind. I'm still making notes to myself.
Well, is that okay, Dick? Can leave it there until you want it?
We're all
Sure.
we're getting things set up, making sure ESP is. It looks like it stopped flashing. If you have questions, you can raise your hand. It looks like Greg has a question up there, and Janie, you have the mouse. So you go over here. There's that question mark. Yes. Oh, Greg's saying he's here. Awesome. Thank you, Greg. But go ahead, and if you have questions as we go along, go ahead and type them in the chat. We will stop periodically to ask for questions as we move along. You should have received from Ruth an email with, let me count, 1, 2, 3, 4 documents, and we'll be going through those documents today during the webinar, and I hope that each of you have those documents in front of you as we go along. So do we want to go around the room and let them know who's here in the room?
We can if you want.
Okay, well, Ruth is going to be talking. This is Shan, and I'm going to be talking, and then Dick is going to be talking, and we have a couple other. I think Jeff's here. Jeff Botts is here for questions come up. Oh, okay. He's not here. Never mind. I outed him. Excuse me. So we'll just go ahead and get started. And the first item we wanted to talk about was just to provide some context for the data of why we're collecting it and what we intend to do with it. And Ruth is going to talk about that generally, and then I'll chime in, and then we'll start going over how to record the data before we start talking about how to generate the reports for the data. So go ahead.
So the data that we're looking at specifically is related to the client outcome tracking report. And remember, whenever I gave that to you early on, we had the discussion about whether that could be pulled from ESP rather than y'all having to fill out yet another form. And so that's why we're pulling this data in this moment in time. But kind of in the bigger picture, you know, these are really good tools for y'all to have to track productivity, you know, of your own staff in-house, and to see if you're hitting, you know, milestones that your organization has set for itself. And kind of the data that has given us the most cause for alarm, as Joel indicated earlier, were the number of clients who are referred to options counseling, the number of clients who received options counseling, and the number of clients for whom there has been a level 1 assessment done. You know, and kind of other important things, and these are all pulled directly from the contract, that's why they're on this form, are information about who you're making referrals to and how you're making those referrals, whether it's by email, mail, phone, and specifically a warm handoff. So for this reporting, that's kind of what we're looking closely at. And that's really, at this point, I'm going to just turn it over to Shan.
Okay. Yeah, essentially anytime that you're collecting this kind of data overall, beyond the purposes of fulfilling the contract needs, is that we are trying to determine reach and consumer needs. And so broadly speaking, that's what this data is designed to do, is to evaluate who we're reaching, where they are, and what kinds of needs they're expressing and what kind of services they are getting. And so that, again, is just to provide the context of why we're looking at these particular points of data. And then when we get into the document that has reporting purposes and criteria, we'll talk a little bit more specifically about each data point and what the purpose is of that data and why we're looking at it. But before we get into that, I do want to go in and start talking about collecting of the data. We're at the point on the agenda where we have entering report data into ESP. And if you want to follow along, the document that I have in front of me is the one that's labeled Data Collection for LifeLong Links Outcome Report, Entering IRNA and Options Counseling Data. I'm going to start with that document and read through it. Again, if you have questions, we're trying to monitor that if you have a question, you want to raise your hand, or if you want to put a question in the chat. But we will stop as we go along here to prompt for questions. I kind of want to start back. If you recall, some of you attended our data management training, and an important point in any kind of data collection and analysis is that it starts at the front end when you're collecting the data. That has to be good. That data going in has to be good and have high quality in order for the data that comes out to be useful and accurate. And so you probably have heard me say, or had heard in other points, just people say garbage in and garbage out. So if we put sort of incomplete or inaccurate data in, then the data we're going to get out through the reports is going to be incomplete and inaccurate. So that's why we're starting today with the entering of the data. We're going to go over that very quickly and try to spend most of our time on talking about the generating of the reports and what we're looking at to pull the data. But I do want to, again, it's important that the data going in is as clean and clear as possible. So in that document, as it's explained in the introduction, that this document, short document, contains general instructions for entering into ESP the data that is collected for the LifeLong Links Client Outcome Report. ESP data collected here will be used by you, by us, and other state agencies, specifically DHS, to evaluate consumer needs and service provisions. High quality and useful data analysis is dependent upon accurate, and I would add here, complete data collection. What I don't have here is what this document is not. It is not a step-by-step procedure manual that incorporates the business process or standard work for all of IRNA data entry and options counseling data entry. It's very limited in a high-level general instructions for entering data specific to this report. There's probably some standard work, some sort of business process discussions that might come up, and you can ask them, but generally those have to be laid out and put into as part of another discussion or another document. And this is, again, very high level. So I'm not seeing, Dick, you'll have to scroll because not every, no, on the questions where the attendees, because we can't see everybody if other people are raising their hands. Okay. So I'm just going to start then at the beginning here, and that's adding IRNA information for a consumer. We are not going to go step by step through this through NESP, but just, again, at a high level, just going to review what our assumptions are and where data that we're talking about specifically in NESP. So the first topic I have here is adding IRNA information for a consumer. When an individual contacts the agency seeking information, referrals, or assistance, you should collect as much demographic information as possible about the person, and then in that information provided field, select the options or the topics that best describe the information you discussed with that consumer, and you may select more than one option. So as you can see in there, the screenshot, what we're talking about is that information provided field. There's a number of options in there, and any time you, the IRNA or options counselor is giving information to a consumer, they need to select that information in that field, and as many topics as necessary to capture the content of that query with that consumer. And I have a note here that we do assume that some people are going to call or contact you and simply ask for limited information, such as what are your hours of operation, or they just want to be transferred to another staff person, and or they're not going to give you as many details as you want them to give you. And we understand that that's some limitations, but The best practice is to collect as much information as possible and to capture as accurately as possible the type of information given. And then over here underneath there I have a little reason why. The LifeLong Links client outcome report will include information about the number of individuals receiving information. The information will be used to evaluate consumer reach, what types of people are calling, and needs, what kinds of information they are requesting and receiving. Greg has a question. You want to?
We have to unmute him.
Okay.
You want to unmute him?
Yeah, go ahead and unmute. Yeah.
So Greg, if
he's not called. I mean, he's
Oh.
not. Greg, if you'll just put your question in the chat, and then we'll take a look at it. Where'd the questions panel go?
it's right here.
No, that's the chat.
Oh,
It's over.
I don't know what.
Did it get slid off into the? You know, you can
Minimize it.
minimize your Word document. Okay. While we're trying to figure that, I'm gonna go ahead and Greg, we will get to your question as soon as we can figure out where our questions panel went in the webinar.
Yeah,
Go
go
get
get
Janny or somebody.
We're going to get Janie.
So we will get back to you on your question, but I'm going to go ahead about adding service information for a consumer. So when you provided a consumer with information about a specific service, add that service to the service field. Again, that's in your document. It's highlighted, the service table that we're talking about. It's not shown on this little screenshot, but there is an add button. So when you want to add a service, you select that add button, dialog box or a window will open up where you can populate the information to specify the service. So, so service information can and should be added anytime service information is provided to the consumer. For example, if a consumer contacts the agency at another time, so they made one call, now they're calling again about another service, add that service to the client record. If an options counselor provides the consumer with information about more services down the road, then they should also go in and add that service information to the client record. Again, we have the screenshot there of where a client's service history essentially is showing in that service table. The LifeLong Links client outcome report will include information about the types of service recorded in a consumer's record. The information will be used to evaluate consumer needs by determining the number of IRNA consumers who received information about specific services and by identifying the most frequently types of service information consumers are receiving. Question. Oh,
Much ado over nothing.
okay. So say Greg says sorry he didn't raise his hand, or there was an issue with it. But if you do have a question at this point, please do raise your hand or submit a question in the chat, and we will take a moment to answer any questions you might have at this time.
Gotcha.
So I'll give you a few minutes if you want to type in your questions in the chat, or if you want to indicate by raising your hand and we can unmute you. I think you're going to have to scroll through the attendees list to see if anybody's raising their hand.
Just Greg.
Yeah, well, you can, where that hand is all down, if you choose that, I'll get rid of it.
It's all down. It's down.
All down.
Okay, never mind.
Okay.
And then open the questions panel. Okay. All right. So far so good. We have not received any questions, so I'm gonna keep moving forward. The next procedure we have to define here is referring a consumer to a service provider. So once you've entered in the service information into that service table, then you want to refer that individual to a specific provider for that service. And we've outlined the procedures here. Again, at a high level, you want to go into the type of case and select referral provision. You'll add the service as you normally would, and then you'll match that service to an appropriate provider. Once that service has been matched to provider, the services provider will be listed in the referral history table. If you just simply list a service there without matching to a provider, we are not going to be considering that as being referred to a provider. And then the next, on the next page, page 5, is just, again, just some details about how to refer somebody to options counseling. You select options counseling as the service in the table and match it to the appropriate provider. In most cases, at this point, it's likely to be your own AAA. And then the next particular service we have called out is referring someone to Telligent for Medicaid waiver determination. Again, the procedure there is you select the type of case, referral provision, you add waiver assessment as the service, and then you match the service to Telligent as the provider. And then Telligent then will be listed in that client's record under the referral history table as having been referred to Telligent. Again, the report will include information about referrals to service providers. The information is going to be used to evaluate provider information by identifying the number of consumers who were referred to service providers and the types of providers to whom clients are being referred. 3 areas of specific interest, as you probably have already noted from the client outcome report, are the number of consumers who are being referred to options counseling, the number that are being referred to other AAA services that are not options counseling, and then the number that are being referred to Telligent for Medicaid waiver determination, which is why we specifically called out those 2 types of options above about how to refer options counseling service and Telligent, because that's something that we're going to be looking at. We didn't detail every particular permutation of service and provider and how you're going to match those or refer those. We just called out those 2 specifically because that's of interest in the report. Okay, we're still seeing no questions, so we'll just keep moving ahead. Again, feel free at any time to raise your hand and put a question. Oh, Anthony has a question. So you can either unmute him. Yeah, if you want to just unmute him. There we go. Anthony, go ahead. Or Anthony's line.
We're just wondering about the referring someone to Telligent and the Medicaid waiver determination. Can you explain that a little bit more, please?
Well, Telligent is the
group that Medicaid has contracted with to do the core standardized assessment to determine eligibility for Medicaid waivers. And at this point, they're working with the ID waiver, but going forward, they're going to be working with all the waivers. Mm-hmm. And so this is to track how many people you've referred to Telligent for waiver eligibility. We understand that at this point, you're not seeing a bunch of clients mm-hmm. who are applying for the ID waiver, but you will hopefully see those coming forward, and you need to know what to do with them, and you need to track it. I did make a note to myself to clarify with DHS how, if they intend for us to track what other waivers you're referring to, mm-hmm. and if they give us different guidance on that, we'll report back to you.
Right.
But as Shane was talking, I made that note to myself.
Right. So did that answer your question?
No. What if the individual is applying for the Medicaid waiver? We're in the process of doing the paperwork to send it in to DHS. At that time, are we referring them to Telligent, even though they'll be on the waiting list?
Well, they don't know if they're going to be on the waiting list until they know if they're eligible, and they don't know if they're eligible until Telligent does the assessment.
But there is a waiting list on the ID waiver.
Right, but they can't even go on the waiting list. They need to be in touch with Telligent. As soon as you identify someone who wants to apply for that waiver, they need to be referred to Telligent.
That's not true. And we can if you're still unclear about that, you still have a question mark, we'll make a note, and we will contact DHS and find out what their process is for working with them on those ID waivers, because really at this point what we're talking about, as far as we know, Intelligent is only working on ID waiver cases at this point. But we will give you additional information, I guess, about that process then.
So we're probably not going to see that. We're probably not going to see that very often then.
Right. Correct. Right.
At this point.
Right. Yes. Yep. And yeah. So we are expecting those numbers at this point to not be particularly high, but it is something that they want to see as Intelligent takes over doing the assessments for all of the waivers. It is something that we're going to want to look at going forward. Does that do it? Okay. If you want to go ahead and mute. Okay. So the next item to look at is adding the provider referral method to a consumer record, and we're making. This is what we mean by that. Is the procedure is that we want you to record the method by which you connected a consumer to a provider. So once you've done the services, you've matched them to the provider, and now you have information about the providers of the services that the client is interested in, what method are you using to get that information to the consumer? So are you emailing that information to the consumer? Are you mailing it? Are they coming into the office and you're giving it to them at that point, or are you doing a warm handoff? And by warm handoff, and Ruth, you can correct me, we mean that you had them on the phone or they're with you in person and you called and got them directly connected up with the provider of that service to start talking about getting things set up or what other information that provider might need in order to begin delivering the service.
So, and just to clarify that, and Paula, you stop me if Paula's here too, so she has my back. If I'm wrong, you need to tell me. But it's not necessarily how is. So the warm handoff would certainly be, there would be a consumer in the mix. But if you're doing the referral by email, that would be an email between you and the provider, not you and the consumer. Mm-hmm. And the referral by mail would be between you and the provider, not you and the consumer. So I just didn't want to confuse. Yeah, so the only time that there would be a consumer in this mix, how is the referral made not to the consumer but to the provider? Right? You don't make a referral, you refer the consumer to the provider, and it's how was that done? Was it done by email? Was it done by mail? Was it done by phone? And if it was done by phone, was that a warm handoff? Okay. So however,
and the referral in the office will be, I wanted that to be explained first today, and then tomorrow we will add that to the activity drop-down list.
Okay, that's
so
what
you understand why that is there.
Right. So if somebody walks into the office, that's what the in-office option is. So we have a couple questions coming in about referrals. The first is, does that include referral for options counseling? So what I'm assuming there is somebody gets a call from the IRNA person takes the call, and then they want to refer the person to in-house to the options counselor. And I'm going to answer that as yes. You want to document that, how you did that, because in this case, you are the service provider of options counseling. The service is options counseling, and in this case, you are the provider. So how are you connecting up that consumer who's looking for the service with the provider who is you? So yes, you'd want to document that. Tanya, was your question. I hope that answered that. And then referral with a release of information. I'm not sure what the question is. So Donnell, if you want to, we can maybe unmute Donnell and ask her to clarify that question. Okay, Donnell, you're unmuted. Can you clarify your question about referral with a release of information?
Unmute her on the other line.
She's, oh, okay.
Okay, now
okay, Donnell, we've got you unmuted 3 times, so let's see if we...
I need to check with what staff asked the question.
Okay.
Oh, okay, thank you.
We'll leave her unmuted.
Okay, and if you want to clarify that in the chat, Donnell, we will...
You already talked about that.
Yeah.
that question came out.
Okay, so another question came out about the referral process to Telegen, and we will get back with you on that. So again, the point of collecting this information is that we are trying to get at how many, the ultimate goal is to get a sense of how many consumers are being connected through to a provider through the warm handoff. And so the whole point of collecting all of these different methods is to get a sense of what is the most frequently, at this point in time, the most frequently used method for connecting up a consumer to a service provider, with the aim of that we want them to be warm referrals. But we know that's not always going to happen 100% of the time. So the question from Holly, in regards to referral in office, I need clarification. If a consumer is in our office, I would not be referring them to provider via one of the other referral methods. Well, you're probably, if it's an IRNA person who's referring to the options counselor, I would assume that is a warm handoff. So it is internal, but you got to think of yourself as the service provider for that service. Maybe at some point down the road, a different agency has an options counselor who does services, and you're going to hand that person off to them. So think of yourself as the provider for the service, and how are you connecting up the consumer with that provider? Okay. So again, on page 6 and 7, it lists out the methods or the steps to go through in order to select the referral method used. And when you're successful, or when you've completed the steps, the client's activity history table will show the referral information as entered in the history note. And again, that little blurb there at the bottom indicates why we are collecting that information. Okay, Dick's monitoring questions for us. So another question from, okay, so there we go. Okay, go ahead, Anthony's line, aging resources.
Okay, just wondering on the referral warm handoff, so obviously that's to the options counselor possibly. Can that be also to family caregiver specialists? Could it also be to case management within our own agency or the elder rights person?
If you are the service, if you consider yourself, so you're going in and you're selecting the service, and that's, you're selecting yourself as the provider, then yes, you are the provider of that service. So you want to track the method by which, even if it's an, I know it's an internal thing, but think of it yourself as the provider. Okay.
So the referral by email, the referral by mail, that would be if we contacted the provider ourselves for the client.
Or if you send the information for the referral to the client. It works in both directions.
So for instance, let's say you are working with a client and you're collecting their information and you're emailing that information to the provider so that they can follow up with that client. Then that's a referral by email. Or you will have generated provider information for an individual and you're emailing that information to the client. In either case, that is a referral by email. Does that help?
So yeah, so does if you mail them a packet, and
yep.
Let's say you spend 10 minutes on the phone with them, and you put telephone call, caregiver,
yep.
and then you mail them a packet. That would be
right.
a separate entry as far as referral by mail.
Correct.
Okay.
To indicate that yes.
I have a question. Let's say you're on the telephone with somebody and they want a homemaker program, and you've looked it up and you have 3 different homemaker programs. You're giving them those names and numbers and all that information over the phone to the consumer so they can then choose or talk to all 3 of them and decide this one seems to fit my situation best. So is that a referral by telephone? You're not calling any of those providers. You're giving the information over the telephone to the consumer.
Correct. Right. That would be, yes, that you connected them through the phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
You do 3 different referrals for each provider.
I don't know. That's good question.
I knew that question was coming.
So you heard the question?
Well, I anticipated the question, and I wish I'd had a really pithy answer. So the question is if I give information by phone and I email something, and then later I mail something, do you have to track those as 3 separate entries? And I'm gonna think on that one. I just, I don't want to create a whole bunch of work and a whole bunch of data entries. So, if Ruth, maybe we can note. We'll give you an answer to that question.
You were asking.
Well,
We have one more.
one more question.
Okay, one more, and then we're gonna. Yep.
If you make a referral, would you do a referral per provider? So if I made a referral to 3 different home health agencies, would I document 3 different referrals during that phone conversation? Or would you gather that data when you're looking at the service provider that we matched up?
We are looking at by match. Well, to me, that's sort of along the same vein of questions of how you're going to document. It's three different providers. And if you could write that up and submit that to Ruth.
Yeah.
That kind of a scenario, and then we will
We'll respond.
We'll come up with something.
And we'll also post any follow-up that we get from this. We'll post to an FAQ on our website.
Yeah.
But please submit those questions so that we can get clarification to you.
And like I said, a lot of these questions have to get you're drilling into things like standard work and business process, which that needs to be done. And you need to have a manual that helps you answer those questions, and we don't have that at this point. But we will try to do the best we can with.
And honestly, for today, for this contract, we are interested in getting numbers in these columns. It's not, that conversation is really not as important to what we're trying to achieve today. And I'm not saying that it's not important, but for this report, we just want to get some numbers in these columns.
Okay. All right.
Would you be able to maybe come up with a scenario and open up ESP and walk through the referral processes, maybe some that we've already talked about, just how that would look?
You're asking us to go through it right now?
Yeah.
If we have time at the end.
Actually, if we have time at the end, because we really do want to get to the scripting and the reports and how to run that, but if we will come up, if you can sort of write up the scenario for us.
That's what's confusing, to actually see it happen would be useful, to kind of see like the flow that you're using.
All right, well, so
but let's try. And I told them yesterday, don't walk away from this webinar without your questions answered, and I mean that. But we do have to get all the way through so if we're going to do a case study, let's do that at the end. If that's okay, please just make notes of what you want us to go through, and we'll do our best to get that.
Right. Yes. Is that all right?
Yep.
Just make a note. We'll try to circle back around, and if we can't get to it by the end, then we will try to document in more detail the flow, the steps. Okay. All right.
Good.
So Holly has another question. Go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead and mute. We're going to mute you right now for Aging Resources, and okay.
When I select a referral by activity in the history note, it is just a tracking method, correct? I would assume that any activity I select as referral by would not have a
time. Okay, so it's basically the rest of the fields, and that does get back to sort of the question I think we're getting from Aging Resources about the steps of what you want populated in those fields in order to track the referral method. So I think what Holly's getting at is that you're just tracking the referral method. You don't necessarily have to indicate how long you spoke on the phone with somebody. Right. That would be under a different history note.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and so hopefully, Holly, when we go through that process or document those steps, we will capture that kind of response. So,
Tanya.
Okay, Tanya has. If you want to unmute her, Dick. Oh,
down. Down, right there.
Right there we go. Yep.
Okay, Tanya. Okay.
Well, I think their question stays up the whole time once they ask one.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So are you okay, Tanya? You don't have a question? Okay. So, all right. Well, that's good. You know, as we move through this document, things become more complex and complicated. So the next topic we're going to look at is recording a Level 1 assessment as completed. The procedures, you should indicate that a Level 1 assessment has been completed with the consumer when all of the fields in the consumer information section of the Level 1 assessment form have been completed. And then below that we have a sort of a little figure snapshot of the Level 1 assessment form and the fields that need to be completed in order for this form to be considered complete. And this is sort of the message we've been giving since we did the time studies. So who completes all those fields, when they complete them in the process, that's, again, a business process that we have that for the purposes here of tracking it in ESP or when to record it is a separate conversation. But once those fields have been completed, then you're going to go to the history note button. You're going to open the history note window. In the activity drop-down, you'll select Level 1 assessment is completed. Enter any other case note information or other data as appropriate. Then you'll choose the Add button. And once that's done, then in the activity history table, it'll say Level 1 assessment completed. So again, I want to emphasize at this point, I don't have answers about the process of who goes through, of how completing that form. What this is telling you is when you go into ESP and record it as being completed and how to do that. Okay, so I don't know, Jake, did that generate any questions or? Yeah, it's difficult because our.
Someone to raise their hand.
Yeah.
If you have a new question.
If you have a new question, just go ahead and raise your hand, and that will help us to check in the chat. Okay. The next outline here is how to record when options counseling has been completed. The procedure is to note when options counseling services was initiated and completed, do the following. The first thing you'll need to do is verify that options counseling appears in that service list table, on the client record. If not, then go ahead and add the service and match it to your agency as the provider. Then when options counseling is initiated, you're going to choose options counseling in the program field. You're going to do add services, you're going to do referrals, whatever you do as part of your options counseling activities. You're going to be adding your follow-up notes. Okay, and then as I understand it, when options counseling is complete, is after the 30-day follow-up note. So you've done your 30-day follow-up note. The client has indicated that things are done. So then you are ready to go into ESP and mark that options counseling service as complete. And you'll do that by going into the history note. In the activity drop-down, select options counseling complete. Enter any case note information or other data as appropriate, choose the Add button, and then Options Counseling Complete will appear in the Activity History window. So, again, high-level steps of how to get that recorded into ESP. And at this point, I don't see that we've generated any additional questions. So, okay. So this last one has a very specific purpose. One of the things we're trying to get at with the whole process is to determine whether our services help people stay in their home longer or defer placement into a nursing home through the provision of HCBS services. So we were trying to figure out a good way to sort of capture that activity. And this is the method that we came up with. So as options counselors are working with an individual, they may learn that some of those consumers are making decisions about whether to pursue a move to a nursing home or to pursue home and community-based services in order to remain in the home. We are attempting to gauge the number of consumers who are considering these options, and of those, the number that chose to access HCBS in their home. So this is the procedure that we came up with to help us capture those specific instances. So these on pages 10 and 11 outline the steps for recording this in ESP. So to note when options counseling consumers who are given information about institutional placement and HCBS services and chose to use HCBS services instead of institutional placement, do the following. Okay, first you want to verify that options counseling appears in the service list or the service table. If not, then you need to add the service and match it to your agency as the provider. When options counseling is initiated, you're going to choose options counseling in the program field. And then review the consumer's service information again and make sure that if the consumer sought information, service information about nursing homes, verify nursing home appears in the service table and add the service when necessary. The reason that you want to go back and verify and look in that service field, it could be that from the time they made initial contact with your agency to the time that you are providing options counseling, maybe they didn't initially ask about nursing home, but somehow through that process of options counseling, that service question was raised. And so you might need to go back into that service table and add nursing home as a service that person was considering. And then you also want to go back into the service table and make sure that there are any other services that you provided them information about, such as home-delivered meals or chores or whatever they may have needed. Go ahead and make sure that, those services are noted in that service table. So then you've done your options counseling, you've added any kind of information that you needed to about that client to keep their record as accurate as possible. You've done your 30-day follow-up and you've entered your 30-day follow-up note, and now you're ready to mark that options counseling case as complete. So you're going to go into the activity drop-down field, you're going to select options counseling complete. And in the case note field is where you want to document the outcome of that specific case. So if they have made a decision, they had information about nursing homes, they have information about their HCBS, and at this time they're going to go with the home and community-based services to remain in the home, then in the case note field you want to type the text string as it lists there, HCBS, as the first line in the case note if the consumer is utilizing or pursuing HCBS services. If it turns out that the client ended up going to the nursing home or is planning on going into the nursing home, then type NH in the first line of the case note for the consumer if the consumer has moved or is arranging to move into a facility such as a nursing home.
And although we are typically, our history has been dealing with people who are older and would typically end up in a nursing home, use that NH if it's any institutional placement at all. It doesn't. We're not going to mince words about that. If it's an institutional placement, even if it's not a nursing home, just use that NH so that it'll be easy for us to pull the data.
Right. Thank you. And then if the consumer has not yet made a decision, so they are still equally considering, then you want to just type undecided in that line. Then you'll enter remaining case note information and choose add, and then the activity history will show that the options counseling is complete, and then in the other document we show that the note field will indicate one of those lines or one of those text strings. And then here at the bottom is a note. This was brought up, I think, last time when we did this as a best practice, that if after the end of options counseling, you are actually then referring them on to case management, hold off on entering that final note until they have actually been connected up with their case manager. Then go ahead and complete it out and indicate HCBS in the note. Okay. So, phew, got through that
I
document.
see Anthony, Aging Resources has their hand up.
Aging.
So we have unmuted you.
Go ahead.
I have another question. So you said put NH no matter what institution they go to. I don't know what would be another institution besides a nursing home, because if it was, the only thing I can think of is assisted living, and we still consider that not institutional.
So if it's a child, if it's a person with a developmental disability, they might go to a, I don't even know what you call them here. Shan, help me out.
I don't know.
So in other states, we call them ICF-ID.
Right, ICF-MR, well, ID.
ICF-ID.
Yeah, so if they're going to another sort of institutional facility that's not quite a nursing home, but it is some sort of institutional placement, then you'll want to indicate NH, even though it's really an institution.
All right.
Does that help, Margaret?
Yeah, thank you.
And that, you know, it might include the veterans home. You know, people call that the veterans home, but it's a nursing home. So, yeah.
Okay, you want to go ahead and unmute them? Can we check for questions too under that questions tab? Oh, yeah, wrong one. That's okay. I know that mouse is, okay.
Okay,
All right, good. Okay, so we're going to move ahead then and go into doing the report. So Dick, I want to switch over to however you want to do that. So this next document is, as I'm just going to again read the introduction. This document explains the purposes for collecting the data contained in the client outcome report and the criteria used to generate the data. This document is for management and program staff who will be reviewing and generating report data. It provides a narrative explanation for the ESP builder scripts provided to each agency, so you should have received that document with your query scripts. This document that I'm preparing that we're going to go over here is not written for people who are entering data, so I would discourage from handing this out to IRNA. This document that we're going to go over to your IRNA people, your options counseling people, this is for people who need to be looking at those the reports, who will be entering the scripts, or who will need to understand the report and what data it's pulling out and what data it's not pulling out. So.
Yeah, the question.
Okay, so there is another question before we move on from this. Do we use nursing home when client goes to a residential care facility?
Is that for like rehab?
Is that for rehab or?
Shelly.
Sherry,
Hello.
You're unmuted.
No, a residential care facility, I think, serve ID waiver. It's a lower level of care than a ICF or nursing home.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So it's somebody who's considered as being in an institution. That's what we're trying to get at, because we're trying to get at distinguishing between people who are getting the services that help them to remain in the home versus those who end up having to go to some sort of institution to get their care there. That's what we're trying to get at.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Now we'll go ahead.
Okay. So a couple of caveats, and Dick's going to correct me if I'm wrong on all this, and he's going to be jumping in here, is that the thing to keep in mind with this report is that it's a snapshot in time as when the backup was made. And the reason that we're using backup data and not running reports on live data is that that data changes from minute to minute. You can run a report and then an hour later run that report on the live data and the numbers are going to be different. And so we run our reports off of a backup so that we can recreate the numbers if we need to. Otherwise, we don't have a way to recreate numbers off of live data. So again, just to keep that in mind, that this is always a snapshot in time of when that backup was done. And Dick, what's the time frame that we are looking at? Is the 5th of the month that we're going to get the backup?
We said that.
So after this month, the 5th of the month, is that what you decided with yours?
I can get it on the 1st, but you wanted them to send back, and are you going to have them send something to them and then they change it and then I get another?
Not after this.
Okay.
So that's why we're giving them the script.
Okay.
So we're going to be pulling data on the first of the month. We'll be getting a backup from Medicaid from IME on the first of the month. So that's your snapshot in time.
Right.
That said, after this data, after this training, we are going to give you the opportunity to go in and make any corrections that you think you need to make your data accurately reflect what we're trying to pull, and then we'll do another backup on Monday morning. So the short story is you have between now and bright and early on Monday to change any data that you feel, if you feel like if you need to go in and differently reflect your data so that we're pulling that you're reflecting what we're trying to pull.
You want to give them until Tuesday, Wednesday?
You have no, because I have a deadline on my report. So you have until bright and early Monday morning to go in and make any changes that you need to make, because for this report that I have to submit Tuesday, we're going to give you one more whack at the data.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but if I get a backup Monday morning, they can't do anything after the end of the day tonight, because the backup will come Monday morning, and so if I get the backup at 8 o'clock Monday morning, anything after 8 Monday won't be in there.
That's
right.
What I'm
Anything
saying.
after, yeah.
Okay. Well, you said they can change this Monday.
This is for between now and
Today. That's it. Because
Sunday midnight.
Backup Monday, they can't do anything Monday.
Right.
But they can work on Friday.
Well.
Right.
So, yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's fine.
So yeah. So in other words, we are pulling a backup on Monday at 8 a.m.
That's right.
Yeah. Dick was confused. He's thinking it was Friday. The holiday week threw everybody off. Okay, so up till Monday, that's going to be our backup. We'll get that up. Anything entered after that day is not going to be reflected after 8 a.m. on Monday. It's not going to be reflected in our reports. So again, I just want to. It's difficult to run off of live data. If we send you a report, you just know it's a snapshot of time at the time that we got the backup. And your numbers are not always going to align, but they should be pretty close. Yep. And then the other point to make then is that you might want to be running these reports a week or so before that backup, so that you have a chance to look them over before that backup is pulled. So maybe in that last week of the month, or whatever schedule you're comfortable with, you'll want to be running these scripts to start getting a sense of where your numbers are. And then if you need to go back and investigate and find out what's going on and the changes are necessary, go ahead and make those before we pull the backup.
Okay. So we have a question from Holly. We see that we have questions from Aging Resources, and there for a minute I saw that we had a question from Mick. So Holly's question first is, you're stating that we need to edit everything we deem necessary from October 1 through December 31. That is correct.
Right.
And we have unmuted Aging Resource. Give us a second to get there. Aging Resources, you are unmuted.
That was basically our same question. So this is
okay. And then, Mick, I saw your. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Then you'll be doing another one February 1st that will be for January, and they're going
Correct.
forward. Okay.
That's right.
And there will be no second chance at that. It is what it is from here on out.
Okay, Jill said she has a question.
Okay, well let's go back. Mick, do you have a question? I saw your hand up and then I don't.
Well, we got to get down there and unmute him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jill, you're unmuted.
Okay, Jill. Hello, Jill.
Heritage, if you have your phone on mute, please unmute it. Try *6, Jill, or Heritage, or type your question.
Yeah. Sorry, Jill, we can't hear you.
There it is.
Am I?
Okay, Jill, you are unmuted, but we can't hear you, so why don't you go ahead and type your question?
Okay, go ahead. Okay, wait, we have Nick. Mick?
Yes.
You're unmuted.
Go ahead. One of the questions you answered, but the other question, is more like questions request. Given that this is Thursday, all I'm going to ask is it possible we can have one more day? I understand, but I'm looking at
Mick, you got to take us off speakerphone. We can't hear you.
Oh, I'm not on speakerphone. Sorry.
Okay. You're asking about whether you have another day, so yeah.
He's asking if he can get Monday.
No.
No, we can't do Monday.
You have until you have until midnight on Sunday to change your data. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I'm not on speakerphone, but yes.
Okay.
Okay, so can I repeat? So Jill, you have, yes, going back to October.
So Jill wants to, we'll just recap the timeline. So the data, the date reporting period we're looking at is 10/1 to 12/31 of 2014. We are going to get a backup on Monday.
Can I ask? I can't hear you.
We're going to
ask for a backup on Monday from IME. So that means you have until after this webinar and tomorrow to go in and do whatever you feel necessary to clean up your data based on the information that we're talking about today. Does that capture it for you, Jill? Are we okay with that? Okay, I'm going to go ahead.
One more. Go back up.
Okay.
Go back down one more time.
I think that was Jill still.
Okay.
Yeah.
After this, what is the timeline?
Okay, thank you. Okay, so then after this, then in February, we're going to run a report, and that will be from, essentially, it's year to date. So it will be anything that was then will be captured from January.
From October to January.
From October to January, yeah. So it's a year-to-date report, so everything's going to be rolling forward. So in February, it will be reflective of any data that was entered from January. Ooh, she gave us a thank you,
Yay.
so I think we got
You're
that.
welcome.
And then remember that they can't add any new people. They can only change people that are already in there.
Right, we're going to go for that.
Because the date add will be today.
Yeah.
Right.
So they can't be, just so they understand that.
And that does, it'll get captured, it doesn't it?
Okay, so we have, we're going to go ahead and then go into the reporting purposes. So the document that I have in front of me and that I hope that you will pull in front of you is labeled Data Collection for Lifelong Links Outcome Report, Reporting Purposes and Criteria. We have our contents there. And on page 2, you'll see that's the sort of the snapshot, the overview of all the data elements that we are pulling in that report. And I want to give just sort of, again, an overview of why we're collecting that information. So we're collecting the number of consumers, and then the next little sort of section of information we're trying to get at services information. What kind of information? Who of those people who are calling? How many are getting services? What kinds of services they're asking about? And then we're going to be looking at referrals. In other words, they've been matched to a provider. What kind of provider are people getting connected up with for those services? And then the next sort of section of information is we're going to be looking about institutional placement. The next sort of set of data elements there is about information related to options counseling. And then the last little bit there is we have defined some criteria that we're going to be pulling to get at our potential Medicaid population or Medicaid recipients as they are entered into ESP. So that's just our overview. And then as we move forward, we'll drill down a little bit more and talk about those. So what we're going to do is I'm going to review sort of that narrative information. Again, it's very dry information, but it describes the scripts that Dick created to pull the reports and that you can use to run your reports. So I think what we're going to try here is Dick is going to demonstrate to you how to copy and paste the scripts from your scripts document into the ESP Builder scripts as we review each of these data items. So the first major data category here is the number of LifeLong Links consumers, and we're collecting this information to evaluate the need for LifeLong Links services by determining the number of consumers receiving IRNA. The data may also be used to evaluate consumer reach, what types of people are calling and needs, what kinds of information they're requesting and receiving. So the data element we have listed there is simply number of LifeLong Links IRNA consumers, the number of LifeLong Links consumers for whom, and this number is being generated by the number of consumers for whom either a topic has been selected in the information provided field and or a service has been added to the service table. And you see in the illustration there the two fields we're talking about. Information has to be entered into, at minimum, one of those fields. If the information provided field is blank and the services table is blank, they are not being recorded in this count. Okay, they will only be recorded in this count if a topic, at least one topic has been selected in the information provided field, or at least one topic has been, or one service has been listed, has been selected and entered into the service table. So Dick, do you want to, so Dick has written a script to that effect, and he's demonstrating now on screen how to copy and paste that.
And first of all, I preface this, I am not an expert at ESP, and I never claimed to be. So I was trying to recreate these to help you out. So if you have experts out there in ESP, but when I ran these scripts and sent them to Paula, and she copied and pasted them all in for every agency, and we didn't get any error messages, we got numbers back, and for a lot of those, they were only off one or two. And in my mind, you know me, one or two, I'm not going to spend 20 weeks trying to figure that out. But the point is we were close. So the key is to highlight the script underneath the bold, because the bold matches what's in the report. The only thing I caution you is if you accidentally don't highlight everything or you highlight too much, when you go to the builder, simply go to the builder and paste it in there is all you have to do.
Do you want to show them how you got here?
Oh, they don't know that.
I don't know.
Okay.
We're going to back up and show you how you get into the builder. Got logged out due to inactivity. While he's doing that, I want to go over this at the very bottom, the report criteria. It says a consumer will be counted in the client outcome report when the consumer has been entered into ESP after 10/1/2014 and before the end of the report month, and the client's record shows that either a topic has been entered in the information provided field and or a service has been added into the service table. So those dates are equally important in generating the count.
Sorry, you want me to go back?
Yeah, I want you to go back. So.
Okay, so I'm assuming you know, but if you don't, you got to go to the client and hit the builder button, and then you would just paste that filter for the specific one you're looking for. Now, what she's talking about is those dates here. Now, come next quarter, you'll have to go change that end date for each one of these, unless someone tells me I got to create a document for you every month, but I don't plan on doing that, I can tell you that. So you would just need to change that date to January 30th or whatever the end of the month is. But you only change the one date at the end. Don't change the October date. That always stays the same. And so, and I happen to be using Northeast, but if when I paste that in and hit use, then I get results back, and you can see there's 436. Now, as she pointed out, Shan, I ran my numbers off a backup. Now, if you went in and modified any of these clients that didn't have an information and put something in there after that date, it wouldn't be in mine. Or they didn't have a service, and you could have done that in the last 2 weeks, and I wouldn't know that. And so that's the whole point. Between now and the end of the day tomorrow, you might go in and add some services to people, and when I rerun this and get it back up on Tuesday, your numbers might go up.
Right.
And even the numbers I originally sent you or you have in the sheet now is still on my backup, which was January 14th. So you might have changed something in between that, too, as well.
Yeah. So if you ran these today, they're going to be different.
Go back to the builder.
Yep.
Now, everybody, you can manipulate it right from here. You can go up and touch and take the 2 out, delete it, and that's all that you have to do.
Take the 1 out.
If you're going to go to next month, if you want to run them,
You'd have to change it to 2015.
Yeah, 2015 and change your one. You can manipulate it right there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and we're not, the purpose today is not to teach people scripting, right? We're not going to teach you how to script. We're not going to, we've written scripts for you, and if you're uncomfortable with doing that, we are going to be running the scripts, and you, or if you run into issues, I assume at this point.
Well, I want to show you, because if you accidentally didn't copy and everything correctly, if you hit use, if you get any of these error messages, it's probably because you didn't copy and pasted everything or you got too much. And it's not because it's wrong. It's because you need to probably go back and recopy and paste.
Because we've tested these scripts, and I believe Paul has tested these scripts, so we know the scripts are right.
Right. And so, like you said, if I were to overwrite that with my original one and hit use, then I will get results back. Okay.
So let's stop and see if there are any questions at this point, and then maybe open the questions.
Mick has a question, so let's unmute him.
Okay, go Mick.
Can you hear me okay? I'm not on speaker.
Okay, well, you're a little bit echoey, but we'll try to make out what you're saying.
Okay, correct me if I'm wrong, and I don't, does it seem that Alderburn script has an NEI in it, or is that?
Each script, so we've sent to you, each agency has their own script. So you'll want to get your document that says Elderbridge, and the correct site is in your scripts. We're just using NEI3As as an example.
I emailed those to y'all just about 15.
Yeah. So we're just using this as an example. So we do have each script specific to each site. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Want to review?
Let's look at the question
box and see if there's. Okay.
Okay.
Can Dick report?
Nick, though, did we answer?
Yeah,
okay.
It looks like we may have.
Okay. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and move to the next data element. And I guess I just want to get back. Yeah, I already made that point. Never mind. Okay. Let's just move ahead to the next one on service. So the next data elements that we're collecting on is to get information about services. So the first line could be, you could have people in there who simply received information, or that information was entered into that information provided field only, and they're being put into that top level count. The next level is to get at those people who received information about services. So the purpose is to evaluate consumer needs by determining the number of consumers who received information about specific services. And the data element is the number given information about services, the number of LifeLong consumers for whom a service has been added to the service table. And that's highlighted here in that screen. So if that field is blank, there's no services there, they are not going to show up in this count. So a consumer will be counted in the client outcome report when the consumer has been entered into ESP after 10/1/2014 and before the end of the report month, and the client's record showed a service has been added to the services table. Did you want to demonstrate that? Okay, so
so I'm going to the next one here underneath. I'm highlighting it. I'm copying it. I'm simply going back to the builder, replacing the one that's in there. I'm going to hit use and hopefully come up with posted.
Here we go.
368.
okay. So again, that script is only pulling people who have been entered between those dates and have at least one service listed in the service table.
And once again, if you were to go in and add services now to people that didn't have them, they would show up the next time we do this.
Right. Okay. So service information by type of service. The purpose is to evaluate consumer needs by identifying the types of service consumers are receiving. So these next 1, 2, 3, 4, looks like 4 data elements are specific. We're looking for specific types of services entered into that service table. So the first data element is the number of those given information about Medicaid and also Medicare. That little piece of text got dropped off there, but it's Medicaid and Medicare. So of the consumers given information about services, the number for whom Medicaid or Medicare was added as a service in that service table. So again, that example screenshot we have there, you see there's Medicaid is listed in that service table. So when the script is run, that consumer will be included in that count. If Medicare were in there, then instead of Medicaid, then that consumer would also be included into this count. And so, do you want to do again?
And let me just remind you who our funder is for this project. This is a very important field. We don't want to fail to capture this information if you are indeed providing that information.
Okay. So what this is saying is that 24 people had either Medicare or Medicaid listed in their services table. And another reason this came up is that at one point, Dick and Paula and I were pulling information about services, and we had a big list of all the services as they're being captured, and we were noticing that information, that a lot of people were accessing information about Medicare and Medicaid, so we wanted to also look at that. So then.
And the only other thing is just to remind you, when you look at all of these, you'll notice that the date is always at the top, because it's not everybody in the system. It's always those people that were within that date range and added.
Right.
So if you accidentally don't paste that in there, or if you're doing stuff on your own.
On the third line.
Yeah.
So anytime you have that end date in that script is going to need to be changed to cover the reporting period.
And it looks like it appears twice in each script.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you just want to look for those dates and look for the end date and change it to the month for the end of the reporting period as necessary. Okay. Any questions? Okay. So then the next data element is of those given information, how many were given how many have case management as a service in their service table? Again, we're trying to get at, how many people are being connected up with a case management provider or who are given information about case management services. The next data element is of those who are given, of those who have service information. This one's a little bit, it's easier to say it in a not statement than in a positive. So basically what this is going to count, what this is not going to count, that's a bit better way, is only nursing home appears in this service table. Only nursing home, they will not be included in this count. If there are any other types, if there are any services including nursing home, then they will. That's a very confusing thing. So imagine if somebody's service table only has nursing home, they are not going to be included in this count. Because the assumption is, or if they have no services listed, they're also not going to be included in this count. We are looking at, as you can see from this example, this person has multiple services there. We are considering any service that's not nursing home to be a home-based service, and we're trying to get at the number of people who are receiving information about home-based services. So the script is just written, the logic is written in such a way as we're trying to capture everything except nursing home as the only service. So if that's confusing or you want it, that was the time to chime up with a question about that. And maybe Dick can.
Unless you need us to copy and paste, we're going to save time, and I'm not going to copy and paste every one of these.
Right.
So.
Okay. And then the next data element is of those given information about options counseling, again in that service table. If options counseling is listed in that service table, then they are going to be included in this count. So again, the report criteria is from if the client has been entered into ESP after 10/1/2014 and before the end of the report period, and the client's record service table shows the criteria as defined as we've just gone over. That if it has Medicaid or Medicare, they're going to show up in that count. They're going to, if they're options counseling, they're going to show up in that count. If they have case management and so on.
Whether they're matched or not.
Whether they're matched or not at this point is all we're looking at for this data is the service table only. Okay. Any questions at this point about the services information and where that data is coming from or what we're looking at and why? Dick, you want, yeah, we want to scroll down and see if there's any questions. No hands raised, and then maybe open the questions. Okay. Here we go. We got several. So, okay. So Donnell is reporting that perhaps there's an issue with their scripts. So we'll take a look at that, Donnell, to make sure that your document, we'll take a look at it and send you a corrected one.
Okay. And Mick, I'm hearing that the scripts that you were sent, we misunderstood your question before.
Yeah.
So the script, if your scripts were sent out incorrectly, we'll send you new scripts.
Right. We'll send you a document with corrected. And then Jill's asking, wouldn't you want to put in the script the date updated as well? Yeah, Jill. Okay, so that we looked into that. I'm going to let Dick explain why we can't do updated and can only do new.
That's why the numbers originally had everybody crazy, because the updated date, even if I'm added and the updated date changes, even if I misspelled the last name and I changed the name, it had nothing to do with any services or anything. That updated date changes every time you change anything about the consumer. And then the other reason was, you know, this whole project started in October 1st. So we want, and the whole point to me is, the goal is after all this training, you want to make sure any new person entered now is following this process. And yeah, maybe you go back and clean some people up, but that was the whole concept with that.
Yeah, and we did, and I hear you, Jill, because I know that there are folks who make contact with you and then you don't actually start working on them. But we are giving you 15 days leeway. The contracts weren't executed until October 15th between us and Medicaid, and it was much later when they were executed between you and us in a lot of cases. So we're giving you some leeway there anyway. We're letting you report from October 1. So it's not perfect, but it's the best we can do.
And it is due to some limitations within ESP that we can't get a clean way of getting that information for older consumers.
Okay, we're going to close down the question box and move ahead, but we'll check it back in a few minutes.
Okay. So the next
wait, Cecilia, Cecilia, we're gonna unmute you.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The question I have, when we're going back and making the changes to the service box, you know, between the October 1 and end of December 31st, can you change that date to reflect between October and December?
No. No.
Okay, so then if we do go in and add a service, and it was a service that happened between that time, it wouldn't reflect that, you know, within the data that you're going to pull.
No, but keep it in mind that this is cumulative, so it will reflect whenever we pull your January data.
At some point. Okay.
Yep. And I've already explained to DHS that might be the case.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
All righty. We're going to mute you again, Ms. Cecilia.
Okay.
But not just yet, so don't pass.
Okay, now you're muted.
Okay, now you can pass.
Now let it fly. That's right. Okay, so the next piece of information is that we're going to start looking at referrals. And by referral, we mean that the service was matched to a provider. As Dick clarified, that those services we were looking at, the last scripts, we were only looking at the service table. With this next section of information, we're going to be looking at, of those services, how many were matched to a provider. So the purpose of doing this type of information is to evaluate provider information by identifying the number of consumers who received information about specific services and were referred to a provider of that service. And the first data element we have is of those who were given, who have options counseling as a service in the table, the number that were referred or matched to a provider for options counseling. So of this counseling was added as a service and matched to providers. So what those two illustrations depict is that you see options counseling is in that table. You've matched it, which we don't have a picture of that. And then once you've matched it, in the client's referral history, the provider will be listed there. We need both of those conditions to be met in order for them to be counted in this count. In other words, they have services listed and they've been matched to most likely your agency as the provider. When those two conditions are met, they will be included in the count.
I want to go back here.
Okay, Dick needs to go back, and I'm going to let him take over the...
Correction, if you add a service today, it'll get counted. The service, the date that you, even though it may be updated today, if you add a service today for a client in October, it'll get updated in the backup next week. Because the service table, I don't care about any date range. It's just if the client was added and then matched a service record, it'll get counted.
Okay.
And I think we misinformed Cecilia.
Okay, thank you for that. Yeah, that was
Okay.
my bad.
So
Thank you for that. Let's go ahead and take Cecilia's hand down.
Or maybe she has another question.
No, it did never go down.
Did that answer your question, Cecilia?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
And now now you can hit the little down. Oh, she's gone.
She's gone.
Okay. So back to referrals then. Just to recap, so they'll be counted in there if they've been, the service is in there and they've been matched with a provider.
Stop.
Okay.
Okay, I need to stop her because you'll notice in those three scripts, I couldn't create the scripts or duplicate those with ESP Builder. If one of you experts out there can, because when you do those drop downs, I couldn't find anything that matches that data within the system. So we'll be using our numbers when I get the backup, because in the Builder, there weren't those type of fields to pick from that I could find.
Okay, so you're, which one?
It's for the, referred to an external provider.
Oh, I'm not there yet.
Where are you?
I'm at options counseling.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
My bad.
Yeah, we'll come.
Wow.
So just ignore what Dick said, and he'll come back to it later. So the script, maybe show him the script for this one, Dick, then. So this one's the options counseling, referred options counseling. You're way too far. We're on page 7.
Oh, okay.
The very top there. And now can we show them the script that we're talking about? Because this is, we want to know how many are being referred to options counseling. So if you want to go to...
Gotcha. I'm with you on that one.
Yeah.
This one.
Okay, there you go. No, that's information. That's, yeah. Okay. So what that means is 87 people had the service of options counseling in their table, and then they were matched to a provider, and it's pulling from the referral history in order to get that count. The next data element that we're looking at is the number referred to a AAA service, not options counseling. So of the consumers given information about a service other than options counseling and was matched to the AAA as a provider. So this is, we're trying to get a sense of how many other services for which you are the provider of the service that's not options counseling. So if it's chore or, I don't know, I have the big list in front of me. So
what page are you on?
I'm on page 7.
Am I in the right document?
No, up. There we go. Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, so there we go. So I'm talking, at the very bottom here, refer to AAA services, not options counseling. So again, as I said, we're trying to get a sense of which other AAA services are you referring, of your own services or other AAA services that you are referring clients to.
And that is one of those that you won't have a script for because I couldn't figure it out, and I couldn't find the tables. Okay?
Okay. So
I will do it because I'm getting a backup and have the tables to do it, but the Builder, I couldn't figure out how to do with the Builder. So.
Okay. So the next data element we're looking at, page 8, if you want to scroll down there, Dick, is the number referred to Telegen for Medicaid waiver determination. So again, in this case, it's going to, the script is going to look at whether waiver assessment is in the service table and whether Telegen is listed as the provider. When those two conditions are met, then they will be included in that count. Okay. So then the next data element is number referred to an external provider. And by an external provider, we mean any provider that's not you, that's not a AAA. So of the consumers given information about service, a service was added and matched to a provider, and the provider was not AAA. So again, it's looking at the service in the service table and then the provider history in the referral history table. If there is a provider listed there, then they will be included in this count. And there's no builder script for that external type. So when you are looking at your report, you'll see number referred by external provider type, and underneath there's commercial, faith-based, government. What Dick is saying is that he could not create a script that you could insert into the builder to tabulate this information. Essentially what he does is he has a script that creates results that he exports into another, I don't know if it's Excel or something, to create groupings based on the provider type. So those numbers are numbers that you cannot generate yourself, that we are going to have to generate ourselves.
I'm aware of. Now, if somebody out there can figure it out, go for it.
Yeah. So we've looked at it, and at that point, that's one of the data elements we are not able to provide you scripts to look at. And those provider types are pulled from the provider's record of how they were entered when they were entered into ESP.
It's pulled from the managing organization screen.
There you go. Questions? Do we have any questions about that? Can we do a quick scan and then Dick?
Now, I'm guessing you might, if you could, you probably might be able to go in there and do each one of those individually, but then you'd be running 15 different things, and whether you think it's worth it or not, that's up to you.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions. I'm gonna plunge ahead. So I think I already did that. Referrals by provider type. Yes. So I'm sorry. I jumped ahead. On page 9 is where we have the data element referred by external provider type. So we're looking at this to evaluate provider information by identifying the type of provider to whom consumers were referred. And this information specifically was asked for by DHS, that we get a sense or be able to give them some information about the types of providers to whom we are sending people. I think what they want to get at and what we want to get at is the types of partnerships that are being created and the types of other services that people are accessing. And maybe down the road we'll have a better way to refine that, but at this point that's what we're going forward with. So again, the report criteria is going to be looking at the dates, and then whether it's going to be looking at the service table and the referral history table to pull that data. Okay, so I'm moving ahead to page 10, referrals by referral method. And we kind of talked about how to enter that into ESP, and this is telling us, this script and this information is telling us how we're pulling that information to tabulate that data. So the purpose of looking at the referral by referral method is to determine the most frequently used method to provide referral information to consumers and to determine the number of consumers who were referred to provider through a warm handoff. I think we kind of discussed that previously. So the data element is number by consumer referral. So of the of the consumers referred to a provider, the referral method selected in the activity field in the history note window. When entered, referral by mail, referral by phone, referral by mail, email. Mouth is getting dry, and I'm starting all over. All the referral options will be listed in the activity history table. And so again, the illustration there, it says activity history, and you see there's an entry there for referral by warm handoff. The script is going to look in that activity history table and create a tabulation based on that information. Okay. Okay, so we're going to go ahead then on page 11, consumers receiving information about institutional placement. Again, just to reiterate the conversation we were having earlier, we're trying to get at the number of consumers who are considering both nursing home and home and community-based service as options. And we're doing that by determining first the number of people who are even calling and asking about nursing home services. And then of those, we're going to be looking at how many were also given information about home and community-based services, and then of those, how many were referred to options counseling. So the first data element that we're going to be looking at is the service table, and does nursing home appear in that service table? And we have a question. Where am I? Would elder bridge providers under contract be considered, for example, Community Action is one of our paid providers. Is that an outside provider? I'm going to have to table that question, and I'm going to write it down, or have somebody write it, or we'll write it down and get back to you on that, Helen. So yes, it's a good question, but we'll come back to you with that. Okay, so again, the first question is, or the data is, so if nursing home, again, if the person's asking about institutional placement, again, with that same caveat that we referred to earlier, we're trying to get at how many people are asking about institutional placement. So if they call and ask about that, please record that and you provided them information about nursing homes, record that in the service table, and that individual then will be counted in this particular data element. The next one is of those people, so of the people who had nursing home in their service table, the number for whom any other service was added as a service. So in this case, they have nursing home, they have case management, so there were other services listed there. And as we said earlier, any service that's not nursing home at this point, we are going to be considering a home-based service or an HCBS service. So that next data element is of consumers with nursing home added as a service, the number for whom any other service was added. And then the third data element in that grouping is of those, the number referred to options counseling. So the script is going to be looking at of the consumers with nursing home and any other service added to that service table, the number for whom the service options counseling was entered in the service table and matched to a provider. In other words, it was referred to a provider. Any questions about that?
Yes. I have because that doesn't go down like the one at the bottom. Of those numbers referred to options counseling, for those that asked about institution, those two are subsets of the institutional placement.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so I'm not seeing any questions about that. So then the report criteria, again, it's the text of the script that is in that script document. Okay, page 13. This is, again, now we're looking at options counseling information. We want to know about how many people are being referred to options counseling, and then the number that are completing a level 1 assessment. So we want to evaluate whether consumers are considering long-term supports and services by determining the number of consumers who are referred to options counseling and complete a level 1 assessment. The level 1 assessment is the starting point in identifying long-term supports and service options. So the first item we're going to look at is the number of consumers referred to options counseling. And this is a number that we've pulled previously in the report, but we've replicated it here so that we know that this is the universe or the population of people that we're looking at. So of the consumers given information about the service, the number for whom options counseling was entered in the service and matched to a provider. So that's our first set of our group of people. The next data element is saying of those people in that referred to options counseling, how many or the number where level 1 assessment completed is entered in the activity in the history note window. Level 1 assessment completed will appear in the activity history table. So the report criteria is that the consumer will be counted in the client outcome report when the consumer has been entered into ESP after 10/1/2014 and before the end of the report period, and the client's record meets the criteria defined below, meaning that they were referred to options counseling, and then they also had a level 1 assessment completed. So that level 1 assessment completed appears in the activity history table.
And also, I know I've heard that some people may have had paper forms done. Again, if you go in and enter a history note for these people, they'll get counted as a level 1 assessment completed the next time we do the report. Even though you may have done them, they may not got put into the history note of the consumer.
So I know it's 3 o'clock. It's past our end time, so we are we're gonna plow ahead. And if you have to go, I guess you have to go, and you can catch up with us later. We are recording this session. So the next, we're going to go ahead and move to page 15. We are nearing the end. Is the good sign is consumers who have completed options counseling and the outcome of that service. So again, we want to know how many people are getting it and what happened as a result of that assessment. So, or of that service. So the number of consumers of options counseling completed, the number where options counseling complete is entered into the activity note in the history window. History note window. Options counseling complete will appear in the activity history table. So that's being pulled. That query is looking at the activity history table and is looking for options counseling complete. And when it sees that, it's going that client is going to be included in the count.
And just for clarification, because I think it's possible when you're talking about older clients, they may have that in the history note, but you haven't referred them to the options counseling service or matched them, and that has to apply as well. Right. So don't think just because you did a history note, it's going to count. The others have to apply.
Right, because we say it's referred to.
Right.
They were referred to options counseling, and then it's options counseling complete.
Right.
So when we outlined those steps in that document, those things had to be followed. They had to have options counseling in the service table. They had to be matched to provider, and then you had to choose options counseling complete. So those steps that we outlined in that other document needed to be complete in order to be counted here. So now, of that group of people, how many of them have a level 1 assessment completed in their, as noted in ESP in their client record? So of those people who meet that first criteria, options counseling completed, how many have level 1 assessment complete in their activity history table? That's where that's pulling. Okay. And then the last data element here is how many of those also received information about institutions, or nursing homes. So of that group of people, how many have nursing home in their service table as well? Remember that very last page of that other document outlines the steps here and the things that we're looking at for these scripts. So how many completed, how many did level 1 assessment, how many had nursing homes in their service table, how many then also had another another service in their service table. So of the consumers where options counseling complete is listed in the activity history table, the number for whom nursing home and any other service is in the service table. You see these are all building upon one another. With the last item, of those, the number provided information about institutions and HCBS services, those who opted for HCBS services. So of the consumers, this is the longest and most complicated criterion script, but here it goes. So of the consumers where options counseling complete is listed in the activity history table, the number for whom nursing home and any other services listed in the table and the text HCBS is entered in the note field of the history window. All of those conditions must be met in order for them to be counted in that column or in that cell or in that data category. So again, this is reflective of those steps in that very last document. So questions about that? Okay. Yes, it is an outside provider. Donnell's question. Okay. There you go. So then the page 17, again, is just sort of a synopsis of how people are recorded into those data categories. Okay, we're bringing it all in. Potentially eligible Medicaid individuals and Medicaid recipients. The purpose of collecting these data elements is to determine the number of consumers served who are Medicaid recipients or may be potentially eligible for Medicaid according to self-reported monthly income. So for this data element, the first thing that we are going to look at is whether they've indicated or whether the person who's entering information in DSP for the client has selected Medicaid in the health coverage field. So people that are included in this count have Medicaid recorded in their record as their health coverage. The next data element, oops, looks like I have a little typo there, is we're going to be looking at the income. This is to help us get at what we are seeing as potentially eligible for Medicaid based on income. And so we're pulling the number where the income is in any income range that is not 2001 or more in the monthly income range, and or supplemental security income is entered into the income sources field. So the two illustrations are showing there are more options in here for monthly income range. The only people that won't be counted in this count is if they have $2,001 or more in their monthly income range. So if they have less than that, they're going to be counted, or if they have, or if they have indicated that they receive SSI, and that's recorded in here. And the very last data element is looking at all three of those fields and basically giving us an unduplicated count. So either they've entered Medicaid is entered in the health coverage field, their income indicates that they're earning less than 2001 as reported in the monthly income range field, and or supplemental security income is entered into the income sources field. So that is the data element that we're looking at to give us our Medicaid recipient and or potentially Medicaid eligible population. Phew. Any questions? If you're still awake. Riveting stuff. So, Vic, you want to scroll through to see if anybody has their hand up or if there's any questions? Okay, I wonder if it's like,
No.
You know what? I wonder if at 3 o'clock it's just out.
Oh, no. I don't think so.
Okay.
Find out. Shelley, are you there?
I am.
Oh,
Okay.
great.
She was afraid
It
to
was
shut
so
down.
quiet. I know. I thought we somehow it just
Pull the plug at 3.
somebody pulled the plug at 3 or something. We went into the void. So, okay. So, I guess the thing is you maybe will want to digest this, review questions. If you wanted to look through anything through ESP, we can do that. At this point, I'm done with the information that I had to give you. So, I know we had talked about going back. I don't know. Yeah, some of those things, rather than demonstrate, I mean, we can demonstrate it, but I would rather, if it were me, I'd rather have it documented so I have it in front of me for future reference to look at.
Jill, what's your question?
Jill's question is, when will the recording be available? I will say, we'll get it to, I think Erin posts these to our website for us. So we'll let Erin and Nicole know that the recording is available, and we'll have Ruth send out an email to let people know when it's available. And Dawn says, thank you, because it makes it much more clear, and we're glad. I'm always glad when we make things more clear and less muddy.
Think of anything, Paula?
No. We'll just provide Elder Bridge with that new updated.
Yeah, we'll provide, Donnell and Mick, we'll get you your updated script document so you have your scripts. Okay, going once, twice, sold, I guess. So, all right, well, again, as you digest and you have questions, you send them to Ruth. Ruth will get them to us. I suppose, Dick is willing to take questions and Paula, so thanks, everybody.